Our keynote speaker is an organizer, an educator, a director, a leader. Elissa McBride joined the labor movement as a member of the United Auto Workers in 1989. In 1991, she was recruited to the AFL-CIO Organizing Institute. During her years as an organizer, she worked with factory workers to form unions and win first contracts in North Carolina, Texas, Ohio, Vermont, and Rhode Island. She went on to become the New England organizing director for the Amalgamated Clothing and Textile Workers, and later directed the AFL-CIO Organizing Institute training program. She trained hundreds of community activists and organizers to build power in their workplaces by reaching workers one-on-one and moving them to take collective action. Since joining AFSCME as the director of the Education and Leadership Training Department in 2001, she has taught members, leaders, and staff to become more effective champions for equality, justice, and dignity on the job. She led the creation of AFSCME's Leadership Academy, played a key role in creating AFSCME's Faces and Voices training program, and is able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. Brothers and sisters, let's have a warm welcome for our International Secretary Treasurer, Elissa McBride.
Wow, I feel like I should have worn my Wonder Woman costume, because really, who doesn't want to be aligned with Wonder Woman right now? So I'm so grateful to be here and so grateful to Dan for that fabulous introduction. And I just want to say I'm excited to be with you at this critical moment for your council and for us in the trade union movement. And I'm really especially excited to be with you and your new leadership. It was wonderful to sit in on your convention this morning and hear your firebrand director, Dan DiClemente, talk about taking back the union, the nation, the state, and your cities. And I'm really excited to be here with you. So this is the beginning of a beautiful relationship between Council 66 and AFSCME, and it's wonderful to be part of this partnership. Together, we're stronger at every level. We know that as trade unionists, and it's certainly true for this council and your national union. I wanted to tell you about 3 AFSCME members who I've been thinking about lately. One is from the past, one is from the present, and one is actually a future member of our union. And I'm going to start with the past member. His name is T.O. Jones, and I actually have a picture of him, and I'm going to pass it around, and hopefully it'll end up back to me at some point. This is a picture of T.O. Jones at the ratification of the first contract, the first agreement for sanitation workers in Memphis, Tennessee, almost 50 years ago. And you'll take a look at the picture when it comes around to you, and you'll see that he's joyous, but I learned when I read about him, and you can almost tell from the photo that there are actually tears streaming down his face in this photo. And I want to tell you about why, because I got curious about it when I read about him. So may I pass this photo to someone and have you share it around the room? So T.O. Jones took a job in 1959 with the Memphis Department of Public Works, which meant that he worked in the blistering heat as what was called in that city at that time a tub toter, because people had their garbage in their backyards in tubs, and sanitation workers walked around to the back, lifted those tubs onto their shoulders, and hauled them out to trucks in the street. And almost the minute that T.O. Jones started working as a sanitation worker for the city of Memphis, he tried to form a union. He was one of those people who just had it in his blood. And at that time, there was no recognition, no rights, no raises, no respect. And T.O. Jones tried mightily to get his co-workers to stand up for change, and he failed. He even tried to lead those men out on strike, and it was all men, and I think all African-American men at that time, so it was a civil rights as well as a labor fight. But he was unable to move his co-workers to action. But in 1968, almost 10 years after T.O. Jones began that fight, a spark was lit when 2 sanitation workers were killed. They were crushed to death in the back of a truck. And that was the spark that lit the campaign and led to a strike that Martin Luther King joined as a supporter in the last campaign of his life. He was assassinated during the time that he was supporting those strikers. And they, in fact, went on after the tragic death of Dr. Martin Luther King to win recognition from the city of Memphis and to get their first agreement. And that's what that picture shows. So no wonder this man who'd been working at this for almost 10 years had tears streaming down his face. And that persistence that T.O. Jones showed, to me, that's who we are as AFSCME. That was AFSCME Local 1733, one of the first sanitation workers locals in our union in the South. And T.O. Jones' persistence is who we are as a union. The second member I've been thinking about is a current member. His name is Marty Hathaway, and he has been built really all his life a union in a tough climate in the state of Iowa, where they've been right to work for many, many years. They're already dealing and have been dealing with the challenges of being in a right to work state, but that didn't stop them. Marty was, he was a corrections officer. He was part of a strong union there, and they had the right to collective bargaining starting in the 70s. But this year, as we heard from Dan, in a secret 12-hour session, the governor and the legislature wiped out the right to bargain, with the exception of wages up to the cost of living in the state of Iowa. And they wiped out their dues deduction by payroll. So it is now much tougher in the state of Iowa for public workers to build a better life for themselves, for their families, and for their communities. So Marty could have given up because of those challenges, and also because he had just retired as a corrections officer, but he didn't. Even though he's retired, he did not leave the union, he did not leave the fight, and as we speak, he is signing up other corrections officers and public service workers in Iowa to stick with the union and fight back until they regain their rights in that state. They are not giving up on each other. They are not giving up on their union. And what Marty says when he talks to people about this is, they cannot take our union away from us unless we let them. So that deep understanding that the union is about more than a piece of paper, which is now all they have for a contract. It's about more than even the grievance procedure or the legal rights that we have fought for and won. It's fundamentally about people sticking together, no matter what the context is, no matter what the challenges are. That is AFSCME, that deep understanding. Finally, the future member I want to tell you about is named Lindsay Washington. She's not a dues-paying member of AFSCME yet because she is EMT in a private sector company called American Medical Response, and she's a fairly new and young EMT. She came into headquarters a couple weeks ago to film a video about National EMS Appreciation Week, which just took place a couple weeks ago. She told me about why she became an EMT, which had to do with a fairly frightening story about her sister lighting the kitchen on fire, but fortunately it had a happy ending. Not only did nothing get burned down and everybody survived, but Lindsay got the inspiration to become an EMT when she saw the professionalism of the firefighters and emergency workers who saved her family. And she's been doing this work for a couple of years now for AMR, and she loves it, like most public service workers do. And she really saw room for improvement along with her coworkers. But they could not make those improvements because they didn't have a voice on the job, because they didn't have a union. So they decided to come together and form an organizing committee to create a union for the first time. And even when the employer refused to recognize them, even when they played anti-union videos 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in the break room, and even when the shift scheduler tried to bribe them by promising better shifts to the folks who said they would vote no, they stuck together and they voted yes for AFSCME District Council 20, 136 to 96. a couple of months ago. So they are now your brothers and sisters in AFSCME. And yes, it's great. And it's not easy to organize for the first time, especially in the private sector these days. And Lindsay says they've already seen a difference at work. They've already asked for and gotten some of the safety equipment that they needed in their ambulances. But most of all, what Lindsay said was, now there's hope. There's hope for a future where they can have a better life for themselves, for their families, and serve their communities better. So that vision for a better future, that's AFSCME too. That's who we are as a union. Persistence to keep on fighting, the understanding that the union is really about workers coming together and sticking together, and a vision for a better future for ourselves, our families, and our communities. That's who we are as AFSCME. And my friends, we really need a strong AFSCME with those principles right now, because it's tough times, as you have been talking about already today. It's tough times for working people. It's tough times for public services. And we are working people who provide public services. So that means we're really facing a dual challenge. You've got challenges in this state, including your constitutional convention, this hoax to try to get you to revisit something that's already a beautiful document giving you incredible rights. Why would you want to mess with that? So I hope that you'll all vote no when you have that opportunity. I know you've got some mayor's races and other local races that are challenges for you this year. And you've got challenges with your sisters and brothers across the union at the federal level. And one of those big challenges is this lawsuit that's coming towards the Supreme Court called Janus. And I just want to take a minute to talk about that. You'll hear more about it from John English tomorrow, but it's crucial that we all understand what this case will do. It's the case that's moving fastest to the Supreme Court, and there are many of them in the pipeline that are attempts to undermine your rights, our rights, to strong unions in the public sector. And it's an AFSCME case. Janus is an AFSCME member from the state of Illinois, but he's not the one who's really pulling the strings. The National Right to Work Committee is driving the strategy. The Koch brothers are funding it. So this is an attempt to undermine public workers all across the country. And with the new Supreme Court, with Gorsuch on the Supreme Court, we believe that they will overturn decades of precedent that gave you and other public service workers the right to strong unions, and will turn the entire nation right to work for the public sector. Not by legislation, which we could then undo, but through a Supreme Court decision, which will become precedent. So that is what we're up against nationally, and it will happen within the next year. So we've all got to be ready for that. So how do we fight back against all of these challenges? The local challenges, the state challenges, and these federal challenges. Well, we've got a plan called AFSCME Strong. And it's been around for a few years, but the leadership of the union, which President Saunders has brought together each year for the past several years to strategize, that leadership group just reaffirmed their commitment to AFSCME Strong. And what it's really about at base is having the muscle to fight like hell and win, no matter what kind of challenges we face and no matter where those challenges are coming from. So the way I think about it is that we want local unions and AFSCME to be so strong that they can win on the issues that matter to your coworkers, no matter who the governor is, no matter who the mayor is, no matter who's on the city council, no matter what the Supreme Court does. We have to be able to have the power to stick together, to show up, to fight back, and to win on issues. So what does that mean in sort of practical purposes? AFSCME Strong is about reaching members and potential members through one-on-one communication. We set a goal a few years ago of 1 million one-on-one conversations in this union. And that sounds like a lot, but the good news is we're already over 600,000. We've done over 600,000 one-on-one conversations between members, leaders, staff, all across the union. So there's 2/3 of the way has been achieved already, and we can get to the finish line on that. In Iowa, where I spent some time a couple of weeks ago with people like Marty Hathaway, they're doing that through worksite visits. They're talking to people at breaks and on lunchtime, but they're doing it one-on-one so that they can really connect with people about what's on their minds and ask them to recommit or join the union. And you'll hear more about that from John tomorrow. AFSCME Strong is about connecting with new employees from the minute that they enter public service. And so that can be about a formal presentation, but it is really about one-on-one communication as well. So in Scranton, Pennsylvania, at the Vets Home, there's an AFSCME leader named Marilyn Regan. And what she does is deploys a steward or a leader to talk to every single new employee within hours or days from the time they start and sign them up for the union even before they go to new employee orientation. And then she walks the card to the union hall herself, and she keeps track of all of that so that when people are coming into public service, they immediately understand who the union is, why we exist, and they get a personal connection. AFSCME Strong is about growing, and you should be proud to know that you're part of one of the few national unions that actually grew in 2016. At the end of last year, we were about 12,000 members larger than we were at the beginning, and that's net growth. That's very rare right now in the labor movement because times are very tough for organizing. So we are succeeding in growing this union. AFSCME Strong is about people power, and you've heard a lot about that already this morning, but I just want to take a minute to talk about the two biggest pieces of AFSCME people power. So first, let me ask, how many of you are registered to vote? Stand up if you're registered. Okay, this is good. Now look around and see who you've got to register to vote around you. Now stay standing if you are a people contributor. If you are already contributing to the people program, stay standing. Okay, let's have a round of applause for these sisters and brothers. Because all of you are funding the incredible work that needs to be done to have a voice for all AFSCME members and public service workers in the state of New York. So I hope you'll all join them. And I think Brian McDonnell is prepared to sign you up at the next break. So, so this is the way that we show our power and get our voices heard as public service workers, by registering to vote and by contributing to people. And in New Jersey, where they have a governor's race this fall, they're one of the few states. You don't get a chance at that, I think, until, is it next year? In New Jersey, they have a governor's race, and they need a new governor bad in New Jersey. And so they are actually combining their voter turnout and registration conversations with AFSCME Strong one-on-ones. So they're connecting with members and potential members about what matters to them right now in the workplace and in their cities and counties and in the state, and then they're also asking them to register and turn out to vote. And so that's a new strategy we're using to link up our grassroots political work with our organizing work and really use that opportunity of reaching people at election time to also reach them about committing or recommitting to the union. AFSCME Strong is about local union power. And local union power comes from having strong leadership and a strong member mobilization and communication structure in your local. And one of the ways you can achieve that is through training. And I know you've got some wonderful training available to you already under your new leadership. And I think you're going to hear more about AFSCME Strong activist training, which I really encourage you to take advantage of because that's a local building tool. And finally, AFSCME Strong is about telling our stories of public service, because everybody in here has a story to tell about the difference you make in the services that you provide and for your communities. And we've got some wonderful stories like that on the AFSCME webpage, and I encourage you to take a look. We've also got a new program called the Never Quit Awards, where you can nominate a coworker who really embodies the impact of public service and the idea of never quitting on our communities. So that's something that's part of the AFSCME Strong campaign. I've met a lot of AFSCME leaders and activists in the last couple months as I've been traveling the country in my new role as your Secretary-Treasurer, and I've seen the incredible work that people are doing. So I know that we can accomplish our AFSCME Strong goals. And it really inspires me to hear how people are doing great work in local after local across this country, so that no matter what the future holds, no matter what the Supreme Court does, we are still able to deliver and help the hardworking public service employees of this union have better lives for themselves and their families. So I'm inspired by all that I see despite the tough times that we're in. And I'm inspired when I think about the three members that I told you about at the beginning. From T.O. Jones, I'm inspired to persist, and I hope you are too. We've got to persist. From Marty, I'm inspired to remember that at the foundational level, the union is nothing more and nothing less than people standing up and sticking together. And we can do that no matter who's in office, no matter what the law says. And I'm inspired by Lindsay, and she reminds me that we've all got to share a vision of a better life for ourselves and our families and our communities. And that's part of our role as union leaders, is to share a vision of what can be with our coworkers and other union members. So all of that work adds up to AFSCME Strong. And I also want to share with you something that I took as inspiration from your peers in the state of Wisconsin, which Dan mentioned this morning. It's the toughest of times there because in 2011, they had their rights taken away from them, and they are still fighting on. And in March, I met with their executive board, and they said to me, please tell our sisters and brothers across the union not to waste the time they have between now and when the Supreme Court rules on Janus and makes the entire nation right to work. We didn't have that benefit of being able to see that change coming. It was a cliff for them. But we have the advantage of knowing this is going to happen. It's going to happen probably in less than a year. And we have the advantage of being able to prepare for it by having those one-on-one conversations, by building the people program, by telling stories of the impact that we have as public service workers, by organizing stronger communication and mobilization structures in every single local union. So they said, please tell the folks, don't waste the time you have, use it to strengthen yourselves so that you're ready for those changes. Let me close by asking, how many of you are now or have been stewards for your local? I figured this would be a steward crowd. So I think stewards do the most amazing work in the union. And I want to ask you to, whether you've been or are a steward or not, to join me in thinking about being a steward of the union in a different and expanded way. Of course, you've got to be a steward for your local union to keep it strong for whatever future we face. And you've got to be a steward of Council 66 because you need a strong statewide organization, and now you've got new leadership that is taking you in the right direction. You've got to be a steward of the whole of your council. I'd like to ask you to be a steward of AFSCME nationally, because your sisters and brothers across the country are fighting the same fight as you, and they need you to link arms with them and be a steward of our national power and national voice. To be a steward of our political power through the People program. To be a steward of our movement for the working class and public services, because who's left but us to stand up for working class folks, for the need to cut taxes on workers and raise taxes on the very wealthy. As our brother said earlier, the wealth gap has gotten out of control, and we really need to be defenders of working class rights and increase the share that is going to the working class in this country. So we've got to be stewards for that. And we've got to be stewards for our democracy, because it really needs us right now. I feel like I'm a steward in my role as Secretary-Treasurer of our finances, but also of all those things. So I'm hoping that you'll join me in being a steward at all those levels of our union. And there's a notion of keep on keeping on. We've got to keep on fighting to make sure that we win the battles that matter at every level of the union. We've got to keep on doing the work that you are starting now to build AFSCME strong here in Council 66. And we've got to keep on kicking ass for the working class. Thank you.